The tariff wars continue to rattle Canada amidst our federal election. Which candidate will Canada trust the most in this ongoing battle? That's the big question. So joining us to talk about this and more is Dr. Barry Cooper. He is a professor of political science at the University of Calgary. Dr. Cooper, welcome. Great to have you with us today.
Good to be here.
All right. So everyone is talking about the 25% tariff, which Trump has placed on cars and light trucks. So what's your take on this? How should Canada respond?
Well, I put it this way. I don't think we should respond by taking the approach of our friends in Ontario. I think that Danielle Smith probably has a much more prudent and probably will prove to be more effective response, which is to keep talking and to actually to negotiate. I mean, we're in a better position than they are in Ontario because of the amount of oil that we send down to the States. So that, that probably strengthens her hand. Um, what most of the media discussion has managed to ignore is that, so far as the Americans are concerned, this is the trade part of it is a means to get Canadians or the government of Canada to deal with drugs. The Americans call it a war on drugs. It's only Canadians who talk about a trade war, and the Americans actually have a point. We've had reports over the past several months of exploding labs out in, particularly in the Lower Mainland in BC. There's a huge amount of money laundering that everybody knows about that goes through the Lower Mainland through casinos and so on. So they actually have a pretty good point, and the kind of Canadian nationalist response to this strikes me as being particularly stupid, because if you want to make it a trade war, we, particularly in Ontario and Quebec, are going to be the big losers. So, generally speaking, I'd say the response of Canadian politicians has been pretty dumb.
Okay, almost like they're not getting the right kind of advice from the right people, maybe.
Yeah, well, they have different agendas, particularly with elections going on. I mean, it was quite clear that the re-election of the Ford government in Ontario, Doug Ford simply took advantage of his way of framing differences of opinion with the Americans to emerge as a kind of Captain Canada. That's a mythical position that goes back to before Canada existed. It goes back to the Loyalists, the refugees from the American Revolution.
Wow.
They were saying that at the turn of the 18th to 19th century, and it resonates with people in Ontario. It doesn't make much sense to Albertans, but it seems to make sense to them.
Now, Dr. Cooper, you did mention Alberta there, and you started this out by mentioning the Premier, Danielle Smith. So she is actually being accused right now of treason, among other things, for traveling to Florida to do a talk show with Ben Shapiro, who's, of course, a very right-leaning influencer. What are your thoughts on this?
I think partly she's doing this to show her independence of the Laurentian Canadians Team Canada approach. She's doing this for her own political reasons. I think that most Albertans would reject being subordinate to Ottawa and Queen's Park in Toronto. So I think most Albertans will support this, if for no other reason than it annoys our fellow citizens in the East.
That's funny. Now, Premier Smith has also laid out a list of 9 demands to federal leaders, including no emissions cap on oil and gas, and which is repealing Bill C-69, the No More Pipelines bill, or else. So she's floating the idea of a referendum. So do you think Alberta could actually come to a place where separation is a real, viable option?
I do, particularly if the government of Canada makes no move on any of the things that have been long-standing complaints from a succession of Alberta governments with respect to what the government of Canada has been doing to stifle our economy. Um, and if they keep it up and they refuse to negotiate and they show no interest in negotiating, then that window gets closed. And so there's not much else that Albertans can do. Um, I think a referendum right now probably it wouldn't be a particularly smart idea. But if the government of Canada keeps on being as intransigent as they have been for the past several generations, um, then a referendum, much as in Quebec, would probably sober things up a bit. Um, if you remember, the referendum in Quebec was a response in part to sort of unfinished aspects of the 1982 Constitution, which in turn was a response to the incredible secularization of Quebec after World War II. Now, again, the Canadian society has changed with the enormous amount of economic power in Alberta and Saskatchewan, but there's been no constitutional response to it, even though successive Albertan and increasingly Saskatchewan governments are telling the government of Canada that we're not happy with the way things are set up now. If they don't want to talk, then there is the Clarity Act. There is help that I'm sure that we would get from our friends south of the border. So yeah, there's some real options there, and we'll have to see what the government of Canada does in response to Danielle Smith's long-standing statement about what Alberta's interests are.
Mm-hmm. And how big of an issue do you think pipelines or building pipelines will be in this election? And do you think any of the candidates will actually be able to make this happen?
I think that Mr. Carney will say almost anything. Whether he will repudiate what he truly believes in, and he said many, many times about hydrocarbons, I wouldn't trust the guy for a moment. I don't think that the premier does. Pierre Poilievre, he doesn't seem to have the same kind of hysterical view about climate change as Mark Carney does. So if you were going to be strategic, I suppose you'd want to vote for Poilievre because he is likely to be, he's more likely to approve pipelines, particularly to the Pacific. But again, the Liberals have been on record for years as opposing that. So, why any Albertan in their right mind would vote for a Liberal, kind of beats me. But we'll see. Albertans are, they have their own reasons, I'm sure, to vote whichever way they do.
Mm-hmm, for sure. And which candidates, in your opinion, are dealing with Trump most effectively, or would deal with him most effectively?
Well, I think Danielle Smith would.
Out of the federal candidates.
when she went down to Mar-a-Lago with Kevin O'Leary, they seemed to get along fairly well. Mm-hmm. When President Trump said he thought he'd get along better with liberals than he would with conservatives, nobody.
That was interesting, wasn't it?
Very interesting. But if you look at it from his point of view, what he was saying is that the liberals have so messed up the Canadian economy over the past 10 years that we're in a much weaker position because of that. So, of course, he'd much rather deal with liberals because they've managed to ruin the Canadian economy. That makes perfect sense. Mm-hmm. Poilievre then has replied, yes, well, I've got principles, the implication being obviously that the liberals don't. And again, that would make sense from Trump's point of view, because if you have principles, that means that you're not as transactional as President Trump likes to be in his diplomacy. There's some things, I guess, that for Poilievre are non-negotiable. It's hard to see that there's anything non-negotiable from the Liberals. I mean, they've done already 180-degree turnaround on just about everything that they said was so important a couple of months ago. Those are the kind of people that Trump likes to work with.
Interesting. Okay, something also interesting in this election is that the Conservatives have much more support than they normally have from unions. So what's that all about? What's going on there?
Well, I think that's also part of the principled part of the Conservatives. Mark Carney is been famous for the last 25 years of his life of being a globalist. And when the unions are local, they're not part of some global economy. They're part of an Ontario economy or a BC economy or Quebec or Alberta. Um, they will have local interests, and they would want somebody who would defend them and have their back on some of these negotiations. That would certainly not be Mark Carney. It would not be a globalist. It would be somebody who is serious about and principled, as Polyev kept saying, about what he's going to defend.
Okay. Affordability and climate change are big factors in this election, and Polyev has long promised to axe the tax, but now Mark Carney has also dumped the consumer carbon tax. So do you think voters will trust Carney to put the economy ahead of climate change?
I, I have no idea. Uh, I have some views. I teach. Part of one of the courses I teach is dealing with the environmentalism as an ideology, of which climate change is a major component. Um, whether Canadians accept that Mark Carney can change his mind on something that he is, uh, I won't say he's been fanatical, but he's certainly been very strong in his opinions about um, uh, basically CO2 production. Uh, that if Canadians think he's changed his mind, I think they're dumber than most people would. I don't think he's changed his mind at all. I don't think that he will act. Um, well, he will. He will. I would say he would continue to do what the Liberal Party has done for the past 10 years uh, with on the environmental agenda, which is basically try and shut down and effectively destroy the economy of this province. Um, and I have no reason to think that Mark Carney would do anything any different, no matter what he says. I think the guy will say anything to get elected, and then the hammer will come down.
All right. Another interesting and controversial promise from Pierre Poilievre is to massively cut foreign aid, which he says is often going to untrustworthy places, and instead use that money to protect Canada's Arctic. And then Carney does agree that Canada's Arctic needs to be protected, but he also argues that Canada should not stop showing compassion to needy countries. So do you think that will help the Conservatives, or does it come across as being too much like Elon Musk and Trump?
I think there are a lot of normal Canadians who, whether they vote for the Conservatives or not, who probably are of the view that what Musk is doing and what Trump has told him to do with respect to foreign aid is probably a good idea. Canada, I don't think, has had any serious study of where our tax money goes offshore. We have a few little things every once in a while comes out about, say, UNRWA in the Middle East, but very little is really known about where Canada's offshore expenditures are. Uh, that would be a really interesting thing to study. I mean, it's not an area of my specialization at all, but it would be a very interesting thing for the next government to study, and then see where we can cut a lot of money that often just gets wasted.
Yeah, it is interesting what the Americans are doing right now, for sure. I mean, with that Department of Governmental Efficiency, and that essentially is what Musk is doing. And I guess it looks like he's finding all kinds of stuff that money has been wasted. And then there's the other side, accusing him of axing entire departments and cutting people's jobs. So it's kind of a mess. Both countries are kind of a mess right now, it looks like. But getting back to this election, Dr. Cooper, what do you think Carney and Poilievre need to do to win seats in Quebec?
Well, it would be nice if Mark Carney could speak French. That would probably help him there. Apparently, he's embarrassed by his,
French
let's
speaking
say,
abilities, maybe.
yeah, his limitations.
Okay.
Um, I don't know. I mean, quite frankly, what happens in Quebec is a kind of a black box. Um, it, I noticed today in the paper that Polyev said that he would not cut supply management. Okay, that'd be nice if somebody, some politician, someday would say that supply management harms everybody except Quebec milk farmers and cheese producers. But of course, they don't want to do that. For obvious short-term electoral reasons. Uh, Quite frankly, I've got no idea what. I don't follow Quebec politics that much, uh, and I really have no idea what who's going to come out with on the long end of the stick there. I kind of hope it's the Bloc. I mean, they always provide entertaining remarks in the House of Commons.
There you go for our entertainment. Well, I didn't get to all my questions today, but unfortunately we're out of time here, Dr. Cooper, but I thank you so much for being with us today.
You're welcome. Good talking to you.
You as well. Barry Cooper is a professor of political science at the University of Calgary.